Hello, my name is Heidi Blair, and I am a historian here at the Reichert House in Seattle. Today, I am going to read a few sections from my new book on the friendship between writer Edgar Allan Poe and Lyndon Baines Johnson, 36th President of the United States. Inspired by pandemic social distancing, I have been thinking a lot lately about how friendships thrive during difficult circumstances, and I was particularly struck by the relationship between Poe and LBJ. They were very different men living through very different and difficult times, and yet somehow they managed to find solace and strength from each other. This is my favorite photo of Edgar Allan Poe. He was born in 1809 and died at the age of 40 in 1849. A lot of the negative things we remember about Poe were written after his death by his literary nemesis Rufus Wilmot Griswold, who definitely had it out for him. But in Griswold's defense, Poe did drink too much, marry his 13-year-old cousin, and had himself purposefully court-martialed to get out of West Point. Also, there was this whole Henry Wadsworth Longfellow situation, and honestly, I could write a whole other book about that. But Poe was the father of the detective novel, and also wrote darkly romantic poetry, Gothic short stories, and scathing literary reviews. Unfortunately, many of his accolades came after his death. This is Lyndon Johnson, born 1908, died 1973. He's the US president I am most interested in, not because he was a great person. I don't think anybody can really excuse his part in the American war in Vietnam, but because he's such a mass of contradictions. His great society included the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the war on poverty, arts funding, healthcare, public broadcasting, voting rights, and much more. He was also a bully, foul-mouthed, possibly involved in election fraud, and an all-around difficult person. So here we have two men who by all rights should not be friends. Poe was a prickly loner who lived to write, and LBJ a gregarious politician who rose to the highest position in the United States. While the origins of their friendship are somewhat murky, we do know they started a correspondence when Johnson was serving in the Senate. Earlier, while he was in the House of Representatives, he wrote of his love of Poe's poem, The Haunted Palace. Later in life, he seemed to find great comfort from the following lines. But evil things in robes of sorrow assailed the monarch's high estate. Ah, let us mourn, for never morrow shall dawn upon him desolate. Round about his home the glory that blushed and bloomed is but a dim remembered story of the old time entombed. Poe first started visiting Johnson at the White House early in his presidency. Initially, it was to console him over the loss of President Kennedy, who, while never a friend of Johnson's, was someone he had come to accommodations with. Later, it was to help Johnson blow off steam from the heaviness of his responsibilities. Here you can see them playing poker, and while it is fairly obvious from the look on Johnson's face that he always suspected Poe of cheating, there is nothing in the records to indicate he was ever able to prove it. It was not until public opinion turned away from Johnson because of the war that he really understood his friend's true importance. Poe had known loss and disapproval. He was familiar with regret. Johnson had spent a lifetime bulldozing his way through opposition, and it was difficult for him to grasp that he could not control how the public saw him. The two started spending more time together, just talking over a bowl of Lady Bird Johnson's chili or walking through President Kennedy's rose garden. It is hard to fail, to know perhaps that one has done wrong and will eventually need to account for it. Johnson needed Poe to teach him how to deal with defeat, and Poe needed Johnson to validate his worth. To be honest, I don't find either man likable, but I am moved by their friendship and hope that in my darkest hour, I will have a similar relationship to count on. Okay, thank you very much for attending this week's lecture. Next week, I will be discussing Lady Bird Johnson and her Highway Beautification Act. Have a good day.